Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in the last tutorial we looked at getting some JSON from a JSON server, and in this tutorial we're going to look at parsing that JSON. So we've seen that if you go to an appropriate URL such as this one from Twitter, you can get a string of text in a JSON format which looks, for example, like this. And if I format it with a JSON formatter like this one, then it looks maybe something like this, so it looks a lot better. And now, using this as a guide, we can parse that in an Android application. And I've rearranged my Android application a bit last time, so I've given it a text view with a connect button, and when I click connect there, what happens is it goes and it contacts the server at that URL and then just displays the result in the text field. And to do that, I just use standard stuff that we've covered already in the nuts and bolts section of this tutorial, so I won't go over that again, but very briefly, I just added a listener to the button, and in the async task we run download HTML, and that returns whatever it downloads. And in onPost execute, which again we covered this in async tasks previously, we receive the text there that's downloaded, and that's the JSON formatted text, and I just set it as a text in the text view. So now let's work on parsing that text, and the first thing we need to do is we need to parse it into a JSON, well, into a kind of Java data structure rather than a big string of text. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll use a class called JSON tokener, and I can use the constructor. I'll say new JSON tokener, and I'll pass in the text that we want to format there, and then I'll say next value, call the next value method, and that hopefully will return, well, it will return some kind of JSON entity. But let's see what. I'm hoping it's going to be a JSON array, but I'm going to say object obj equals new JSON tokener brackets result dot next value. And let's surround that with try catch, as I know it wants to be. And so notice here, like I'm using, because I only want to use this tokener once to do the parsing once, I'm saying new tokener, and I'm not storing a reference to that object. I'm just calling next value. So this object here is not a tokener, it's whatever next value returns. And next value could return, it's going to return object, but the thing that it returns could be a JSON array if the top level object that's parsed is a JSON array, it's an array of values, or it could be a JSON object if the top level object will be a hash. But I think that the top level object has to be an array, so but let's just check to be sure. And I'm going to just say here, let's say text view dot set text obj dot get class dot toString, and see what that does. And I'll comment this out. I'll comment out the text view dot set text, and I'll run that. So if we look at the JSON while that's loading, I already said in the last tutorial it's made up of arrays and hashes. I didn't actually know you could do that. You can actually expand and contract it, which is quite handy. And the array elements are contained within these square brackets separated by commas, and within these kind of curly parentheses you have hashes, key value pairs, and the key value pairs are represented by JSON objects, and the arrays themselves are represented by JSON array objects. So it's just like lists and hashes in Java, basically. And this can be a little bit hard to understand to start with, but if you work with it a little bit, you'll get the idea pretty quickly. So I've got my phone up now, it seems to be running, so let's go to the screencast and click connect. And we've got hopefully we've got something. Here we go. So we've got a JSON array object. And why have we got a JSON array? Because the top level object here is an array. And how do we know that? Because this is a square bracket. And what are the elements in the array? Well, let's find out. And I'm guessing they're hashes because, well, I know they're hashes. And hashes are represented. Okay, hashes kind of like, I'm thinking of hash map basically. I should say they're maps, but a map or a set of key value pairs is represented in JSON by a JSON object. So let's get the first value out of that array. In fact, let's iterate through the array. That will be more interesting. So I'm going to go to Eclipse here, and I'm going to go to, the bit that actually parses, where I actually parse that JSON is here, and I've got back a JSON array object. So now I know that this is going to be a JSON array. Let's say JSON array, and let's just call this items or something like that, because each item I assume is going to be a news item, but let's just call it items. And because this next value returns an object, I've got to cast that to the right type, which is JSON array, and I save that. And I'm going to have to put brackets around this whole thing, I think. And let's add the import of JSON array there, and there we go. And now we've got JSON array, we can iterate through it. Let's say for object item in items. So I'll just use a for loop to iterate through this. And I'm gonna say, I think that works. Oh, okay, it's not iterable. I really thought that worked, but I think I'm getting confused between the kind of most common JSON library in Java and this version. Let's try using a for loop instead. So I'm going to say something like for int I equals 0. This is surely bound to work. I less than items dot size, right? It has size. It doesn't have size. I think I'm really getting confused. Length, there we go, length, and I++. So if you want to parse JSON, not in Android, just search for JSON Java, and you'll find a jar file library that you can download, and that has a load of very, very similar methods in. But I think they're not identical, because I'm sure that worked. The iteration worked in the other version. Well, I'm not completely sure. I think it did. Okay, let's try this. And I'm gonna get the items out one by one. I'll say items.get and pass in the index there. And let's say object and item equals items.getI. So I'm iterating over all the items in this JSON array with this for loop. And let's just do here something like text view dot append and item dot get class dot to string, and I think append doesn't write a new line, so let's write a new line after that, like this, and I'm going to run that if there are no errors, which there don't seem to be. And now, any guesses as to what is going to be the class of each item? Well, there's only two possibilities: JSON array and JSON value, and we don't expect to have mixed and matched values in an array. I don't think that's allowed in JSON. I hope not anyway. So they're probably all going to have the same type. And if we just look at the JSON here, so if I go to the browser here, we can see that we've got a curly bracket here, and a curly bracket means a map, a set of key value pairs, which means JSON value rather than JSON array. So the elements, this is an array, and the elements in the array are JSON values. So I expect that we're going to see JSON value coming back here. And let's see if I'm correct. And let's go to the emulator here, the screencast, sorry, and click connect. And we'll see what comes back. And there we go, JSON. Did I say JSON value? I meant JSON object. So we've got JSON objects, and JSON arrays, JSON objects and JSON arrays. Okay, so now I can get the JSON objects. It's really JSON values stuck in my brain for some reason. I can get the JSON objects, and from each of those I can retrieve these key value pairs. And there's not too much more complexity to this, so I should be able to retrieve this headline, the text here, directly from each object. Let's try to do that now. So now I know that each item is a JSON object. I can say here JSON object, and this would break if the format of the JSON supplied by Twitter in this case changed. So you could do if object instance of JSON object and then parse it that way, but since your application is going to be useless anyway if the format changes, I think I'll be content just to assume that it is a JSON object and proceed on that basis. So let's say JSON object, well, I could call it item still, couldn't I? JSON object item equals items.get, and cast that to a JSON object and add the import for JSON object, and let's say string title equals item, and now I can use item dot get string, and because I can get key value pairs from this, if I look at the actual JSON, one key that it's got is text, so I could get all the titles from it using this text key, and clearly this is a string. I know it's a string because it's in double quotes, whereas that is an integer, I suppose, or a long, but this is a string. So let's do get string and retrieve that. I think that's what I want. Let's just have a quick look down. There's nothing more interesting. Here is an example of a key which has as its value another JSON object, another map in other words. So you can have arrays within maps within arrays and so on. You get the idea, I think, probably, or you will do after you've looked at it a bit. Okay, and let's just finish this off by getting the text key here. So I type text in there, and I'm just going to say textView.append title and then append a new line. So this should get me 5 titles of headlines from the Onion's Twitter feed. And if this is kind of quite confusing the first time you see it, and as always, I strongly recommend just working through this yourself step by step, and hopefully you'll see what I'm doing and you'll get the idea of maps within arrays within maps and so on, and you'll see how you can tell if it's an array because of the square bracket, and if it's a JSON object it's going to be a curly bracket and so on, and you'll get the idea of it. But it can sometimes take a little bit of working through before the penny drops, I find. So let's take a look here. I'm holding my phone in my hand and trying to get it the right way up, and there we go, and I'll click the connect button, and there we go. There are a bunch of titles from the Onion. Yeah, the formatting's not great, but that's because, I mean, that genuinely is the stuff that was in there. So we've achieved our aim, and there you go. Okay, so that's enough for this tutorial, and I'm not going to dwell much more, I don't think, on parsing JSON, because that's more or less all there is to it, and you just need to get the hang of this, and it is a bit tedious, but the results can be quite interesting, as you can see. So I'll leave it there for now, and until next time, happy coding.